What's up and welcome to KplusGaming Corner, and in this Remnant 2 video, we're looking at one of my favorite new Invoker builds. This one carves through Apocalypse level difficulty like a steak knife through hot butter, so if you like the run and gun playstyle while enhancing your skill damage potential, then this is the build for you. Without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Starting with the archetype classes, as mentioned, we're using the new Invoker class as our main and the Gunslinger archetype as our secondary. I've mentioned in previous videos, in my opinion, the Gunslinger is one of the better classes, but due to an underwhelming prime perk, which only reloads your weapons and grants you some infinite ammo for a few seconds, this class is much better suited as a secondary, as there are way better prime perks you could be taking advantage of. The Invoker's Visionary prime perk is way more useful for what we're doing, since this doubles the base skill charges for all archetype skills, plus whenever you activate any of your skills, you're reducing all skill cooldowns by 10%, meaning if you play it right, you can almost spam certain skills, in our case the quick draw Gunslinger skill, which fires critical shots that do quite a bit of damage to enemies within 25 meters, and we get 4 of these now instead of 2 because of the prime perk. And if you hold and release it, it fires a more powerful single shot, which is great for bosses and elites, and it's on a pretty generous cooldown as it is. For the Invoker skill, we're using the Way of Kayula, which is now my favorite skill in the game, since it not only does a good amount of damage with the tidal wave you're casting, you're raining down lightning blasts on enemies within 30 meters doing shock damage, plus you're reducing enemy movement speed by 10% as an extra cherry on top. In addition to all this, the Entranced damage perk for the Invoker increases skill damage by 30%. The Communion team perk is also helping to reduce skill cooldown while the Way of Kayula skill is active, and due to the Soothsayer relic perk, we can extend the duration of our Invoker skill when we use a relic, plus we're gaining relic use speed while the skill is active. The Swift Shot Gunslinger damage perk is increasing fire rate by 15%, range damage by 25%, and we're getting an extra 5% crit chance for all firearms, plus the Quick Hands utility perk is giving us a 10% reload speed bonus. Moving on to the amulets, for a while I was using the Silver Ribbon for obvious reasons. With this one we're increasing skill damage by 25%, plus gaining the haste status whenever you activate a skill, which in our case is pretty much all the time. However, I've been having a lot of fun lately with the Jester's Bell, which you can get in Losum. With this one, whenever you cast a mod or skill, you're increasing all damage by 15% for 20 seconds, plus increasing cast speed by 35%, which is quite a bit. Really comes down to preference. Do you want slightly more increased skill damage or a more balanced increase to all damage? And depending on how you have your build set up, these are some fun things to consider. Some other amulets you could consider are the Legacy Protocol, which would further reduce your skill cooldowns by another 20% and would increase your skill duration if you decided to go with something like the Bullet Storm instead of Quick Draw. And there's also the Hyperconductor if you really wanted to go crazy with skill activations. In this setup, you'd be getting 3 uses of Way of Kayula and 6 uses of the Quick Draw skill before everything goes on cooldown. For the rings, the way I have mine set up, I'm using the Burden of the Sciolist for sure. This one increases skill and mod damage by 15% at the cost of some of your ammo reserves, but it's definitely worth it since the ammo reserve reduction is offset by the Gunslinger ammo reserve trait that boosts the reserves by 50%, so ammo reserves aren't really an issue. We're using the Shade Stone to increase skill damage by another 15%. The Crimson Dreamstone increases skill damage by up to 20% depending on how many critical hits you're scoring, and then we have the Burden of the Destroyer, which is increasing all damage by another 15%. If you don't have one of these rings, some others you could consider are the Sapphire Dreamstone, which allows critical hits to reduce skill cooldowns by 4%, or the Stream Coupler for a more defensive route, since activating a skill will regenerate 25% of your max health over 10 seconds. When it comes to the weapons, as usual, it's pretty flexible here. You can run with whichever ones you like best. Usually I'm using the Corrupted Savior as the main and the Corrupted Sorrow as the handgun, and the melee weapon I just really use for cosmetic purposes for the most part. Shout out to the Trinity Crossbow though. I've been having a lot of fun with that one lately. I like it a lot, and it's definitely worth the effort to get your hands on it. You just gotta re-roll the Forgotten Kingdom DLC a few times and give those 3 Trinity mementos to Dwell at the Ward and you'll gain access to it. The key with the weapons, at least for me though, are the mutators you're using, and I'm going with the momentum mutator since we want to increase our crit chance as much as we can fit in. With this one, whenever you get a critical hit, you're increasing crit chance and crit damage by 2%, and it stacks so you can get that up to 20%, plus once you max out this mutator you can get that up to 24% crit chance and crit damage, plus you can extend the duration of the buff to 5 seconds instead of 3, helping you keep the skill damage buff you're getting from the Crimson Dreamstone, so they're doing more damage more often for longer periods. The Deadly Calm Mutator would be another one to consider, since at level 10 this one's increasing ranged crit chance by 10%, or Nearsighted, which at level 10 increases crit chance by 10% but only to enemies within 7 meters, and the Spellweaver Mutator is one I'm using on the handgun, since it both increases mod damage and activating the mod helps reduce your skill cooldowns even more. As I said, the weapons you use are up to your preference, and these are some of the mutators you'll want to seek out and upgrade if you want to get the most out of this build. For the relic, as usual, I'm using the Salvaged Heart, which is pretty much my go-to in most of my builds due to the increased use speed. And for the relic fragments, I'm using skill damage, skill cooldown, and ranged crit chance for this one. One could argue we're already getting plenty of skill cooldowns, so if you instead wanted to go with something like mod damage or ranged crit damage, those would be some great choices as well. This is how I have my trait points set up. We get the gifted Invoker trait, increasing skill duration, which helps Weight of Kayula last a little longer and gets more lightning strikes out there. But for the most part, the traits are flexible. You're free to mix and match here and go with whichever ones fit your playstyle the best. So there you have it. That's the build. You're a visionary spirit of frenzy, blasting your way through enemy hordes like the Kool-Aid Man blasts through brick walls. Let me know in the comments if you're running a similar build and how you have yours set up, and also if you have any questions on where to find some of the rings, amulets, or mutators that I mentioned. Thanks so much for watching if you made it this far, and do give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already. It really helps our channel grow and reach a wider audience, so your help is most definitely appreciated. And if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please consider subscribing and ringing those notification bells to make sure you're getting all the updates on when I'm going live or dropping new videos. Love you guys, and thanks again for all your support. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Until then, peace!